So, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute revealed that in 2008, global military expenditures, which is the amount of money that the world as a whole spends on their militaries, was $1.46 trillion. The same year, U.S. military expenditures were $623 billion, which accounts for 42.5% of all global military expenditures. At 42.5%, the U.S. military spending is more than the next 46 high-spending countries combined. And to put in their perspective, that means we spend more on our military, about 8 times as much on our military than China, 10 times as much as France, 12 times as much as the UK, 14 times as much as Russia, and so on. Now, the authorized 2010 military budget of $663 billion is $40 billion more than the 2008 budget of 2 years ago, and is estimated by the Department of Defense to rise in each successive year. My major claim is that the size of the United States military is unnecessarily large. The reasons and the points I will be talking about for the rest of the speech are that military spending detracts financial attention from dire domestic needs, that United States security needs are overhyped, and that the United States military is not cost efficient. So the first point is that military spending detracts financial attention from dire domestic needs. As I said before, the authorized 2010 military budget is $663 billion. It accounts for 47% of the discretionary federal budget, which is the budget that the President and Congress have control over and must decide on every year. So basically, the money the Department of Defense receives is 8 times more than the Department of Health and Human Services, 25 times as much as the Department of Energy, 14 times as much as the Department of Education, and just basically multitudes more money than any other department receives. So now what I ask of you guys is how you think of what the benefits might be to us, the taxpayers, or to the nation, if some of the $663 billion was reallocated into more domestic purposes such as education, the environment, and infrastructure, or if it helped out some of our more current problems like the national debt, which forced us to pay $383 billion in interest payments last year, and is approaching the $13 trillion mark. The unemployment rate, which hit 10% last month, is the highest it's ever been since 1940. Our education system, which has long since lost its #1 ranking in adults with a degree or a diploma, it continues to suffer from its annual budget cuts, and poverty continues to grow in the United States. And these are just some of the growing domestic problems that can be dealt with even a small portion of the military budget. This is only my second point is that our security needs are overhyped. Many people believe that because of the dramatically increasing terrorist attack casualties and the growing hostilities around the world, we need to increase our military spending to accommodate for our needed national security. But it is just the opposite. It is the billion-dollar weapon programs, the foreign intervention, and the nuclear weapons research that is igniting the arms race throughout Asia and the Middle East. A large military budget is the reason our national security is being threatened. Highly publicized terrorist attacks may give the illusion of Americans being in danger, but the truth is that the terrorist attacks are not the real threat and are a rare occurrence on American soil. Terrorist-related casualties fade in comparison to deaths caused by homicides, natural disasters, and other dangers that are maybe more preventable. Americans would be more scared if we instead addressed the real problems of today rather than worry about and unlikely run with terrorists. My third point is that the military is not cost efficient. We spend billions of dollars every year protecting our troops from explosives that are constructed of fertilizer, motor oil, and a few cents worth of wiring. We spend almost the majority of our entire budget to combat a group that comparatively doesn't spend any money at all. Now the Pentagon plans to spend about $300 billion on F-35 fighters, which will cost around $19,000 per flight hour per plane to do a job that a cheap turboprop plane could do for only $1,000 flight hour. The retired Air Force Colonel Thomas Earhart comments on the F-35, saying it lacks critical performance characteristics needed for high-end challenges, but is overpriced and over-sophisticated for low-end challenges that they will be performing in our current wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is only one such example of how the military is spending money irresponsibly. I grew up on a military base, and I personally invented all the programs that just didn't go anywhere. Programs like Airborne Laser and Joint Strike Fighter, they pushed their production dates back, they requested more money, and eventually most of them just get shut down. I watched my dad bounce between jobs, between departments, because they were really moving over in terms of productivity. So I conclude that the size of the United States military budget is unnecessarily large for the reasons that the military spending detracts financial tension from dire domestic needs, security needs are overhyped, and that the United States military is not cost efficient.
And then we got that one swing in here, finally.
Right, Alex. On the presentation issue, you need to raise your voice just a little bit because you've got kind of a low-key demeanor, and it just needs to project sometimes. Every time you look down, it was hard to catch some of what you were saying. I was usually able to pick up most of what you're saying, but I think a little more energy would be helpful. The proposition is very clearly identified. I think you've got a broad claim here, but you explain where you're headed. The main points are laid out, so it should be easy for us to follow. And internally, you did a good job on signposting. On the first point, you've got a lot of data that you make comparisons on. I do think you get sidetracked a little bit onto other issues concerning what our domestic spending priorities should be, and there are value assumptions that suggest that maybe some of those things are more deserving of our money than the military kinds of things. And I think that that falls a little bit out of the purview of the goal that you should be having here. Show us how the spending that we're not getting our bang for our buck, or that money's getting wasted. I think you need more of that on that first point. On the second point, I didn't think that that was as well developed as the first point, and that created a little bit of a problem. I liked on the third point your discussion of problems with particular programs. You've got the reference to the one fighter plane, and then you've got some general references to some programs that you have a passing familiarity with, although there's not any source citation on those. I doubt very much that you made them up. I don't think that you just pulled them out of the whole cloth. But for instance, if we knew what the costs were and that they ultimately weren't developed or were not effective or something like that, somebody has almost certainly written about or talked about those particular kinds of programs. I think that would strengthen your evidence on that point. All right. Thank you. Abraham is going to be our next speaker. Have you passed off the timing to somebody else? Oh, you have. Thank you. Already thinking about that. Hang on a second.